Slavery has existed in many different forms. Slavery has existed in many different forms. Slavery has existed in many different forms throughout history. The reduction of another human being to the status of property, used for labor at the command of another, has been a feature of almost every society on Earth until the 19th century or so. No system of slavery has attracted more attention than the transatlantic slave trade, established by Europeans to provide slave labor for their American colonies. Around 12 million souls were taken from Africa and forced onto perilous journeys across the Atlantic, where they and their descendants were condemned to a life of servitude. However, retellings of the horrors of Atlantic slavery too often turn into stories of how Europeans alone determined the course of that history. In reality, Africans were not just passive victims. Millions of them were slaves, but many others profited from, produced, and protected that slave trade. In this video, we look at the untold story of the African slave trade. Stick around until the end to learn how some of Africa's greatest kingdoms were built on the profits of slavery, and how Africans fought tooth and nail to protect it from the abolitionist European empires. Slavery has existed in Africa for as long as recorded history. Ancient Egypt had slaves toiling away in its fields and on its monuments. Ancient Carthage trafficked in slaves across the Mediterranean, and the Ethiopian kings of Aksum wrote proudly of the slaves they took in war. Slaves were also exported from Africa for centuries before Europeans arrived. The trans-Saharan slave trade lasted for over 1,000 years and dragged about 10 million people across the desert to be slaves in the Islamic world. The Indian Ocean also had a similarly long-lasting ocean-going slave trade, with about 5 million ending up in slave ships, bound and branded for use in foreign lands. These slaves ended up as laborers, domestic servants, soldiers, or more. Male slaves in the Islamic world were typically castrated, which meant that new slaves had to be regularly imported to maintain the population. For this video, we'll focus on Western Africa, where the Atlantic slave trade was centered. West Africa was removed from the Indian Ocean trade and mostly secure from Islamic slave raids, but slavery was still a feature of life there long before the Atlantic slave trade began. A succession of powerful empires occupied the region, which all rested on complex slave systems. The Ghanaian Empire, from the 3rd to the 13th century, began a tradition of powerful West African imperial states, and built much of its wealth through trans-Saharan trading of slaves or goods acquired through slave labor. The salt, copper, and gold that made the Mali Empire and Mansa Musa fabulously wealthy were all extracted with slave labor. Domestic slavery was also common, and Mali was known to import female slaves from the Mediterranean to act as domestic servants in the households of the elites. Most of the slaves were acquired through conquest of neighboring kingdoms, or tribal groups who were too weak to defend themselves from the organized imperial militaries. Successor empires like the Songhay, Jolof, and Kabu inherited the social and economic structures of slavery and continued to acquire slaves as they scrambled to establish their own territories. Elites in these empires used slaves as a status symbol. An ownership of slaves came to represent someone's wealth and power. Slavery took many different forms in West Africa. Some worked the land or the mines, others served as soldiers or even political advisors. In some places, slaves were permitted to own land that they cultivated in their free time, and might earn enough from this land to buy their own freedom. In other places, the lot of slaves was more miserable. In Benin, for example, slaves were regularly sacrificed to mark important occasions like the anniversary of a king's death. All of this is to say that when Europeans arrived, they did not find an empty land of scattered peoples ripe for enslavement, but complex societies and slave-holding empires whose roots were even older than those of the Europeans themselves. The Atlantic slave trade was started by the Portuguese in the mid-15th century. Originally, slaves were taken to Europe, but this changed in 1526, when the first Portuguese ships carried slaves across the Atlantic to their new American colonies. However, the vision of Europeans landing on an African shore, frightening a tribe of natives into submission, and dragging them in chains to their ship is not representative of what happened for most slaves. Some slaves were indeed taken in European slave raids, but the vast majority were sold to the Europeans by other Africans. The European arrival in West Africa came at the same time as the collapse of the Mali Empire. Various splinter states scrambled over each other to seize territory for themselves. The Europeans, with their firearms, offered these competing rulers a potential advantage over their enemy.
Okay, let's get a biblical scripture on that. Let's go to Joel. Alrighty. Let's go to Joel chapter 3, verse 4. Joel chapter 3, verse 4. Yeah, and what have you to do with me, O Tyre and Zidon? Right? Now, Tyrus and the Zidonians were shipping port cities, and you just saw those, but they named them something else. I forgot what the name was in the video. But these shipping port cities, they, with the so-called Africans, sold other Africans. No. Tyre and Zidon, which are North and South Africans, of those of the caliphate, these individuals like that, they sold Israelites into slavery to the Europeans, where it says down here, the children also, Joel 3 and 6, the children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have you sold unto the Grecians, the Europeans, right? What the video is about, that ye may remove them far from their border of West Africa to the Americas, right? Joel 3 and 4. Will you render me a recompense? And if you recompense me swiftly and speedily, will I return your recompense upon your own head? Because ye have taken my silver and my gold, and have carried into your temples my goodly and pleasant things. Right? The goodly and pleasant things of the Most High, and his silver and gold, his precious jewels and metals, are the children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem. Okay? That the so-called Tyre and Zidon had sold unto the Europeans, aka the Grecians. Behold, I will raise them out of the place where ye have sold them, which is what the Most High Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua is doing right now. He's raising us up as teachers, great men of understanding, where we would spread the truth to other Israelites that will accept the truth as it is written, right? I will raise them up out of the place whither you have sold them, and will return your recompense upon your own head, which is happening right now, right? Out of this war between the Assyrians and the Caramanians, as it is written in 2 Ezra chapter 15, right? Let's get that right quick so I can show you what I mean. 2 Ezra chapter 15, verse 29. Let's start at verse 30. Oh, Salakia. How do you shut that off? That's ridiculous. Shut up. Okay. Salakia, you guys. All right. Verse 30. Also, the Caramanians, and the Caramanians in the biblical context are the Iranians, and the individuals that represents Iran are Hamas and Hezbollah, right? Also, the Caramanians, raging in wrath, shall go forth as the wild boars of the wood, and with great power shall they come and join battle with them, and shall waste a portion of the land of the Assyrians. And the Assyrians, what in the newscasts right today, what they're explaining, that the Israeli are oppressive. They are oppressors in the Middle Eastern area. They're always blowing up, shooting, murdering children in the street, right? They put up a wall all around these so-called Israeli compounds and their families, right? Okay, verse 31. Then shall the dragons have the upper hand, remembering their nature. And if they shall turn themselves, conspiring together in great power to persecute them, who are the land of the Assyrians, right? Then these shall be trouble bled, the land of the Assyrians, okay, the Israeli, and keep silence through their power and shall flee, right? And from the land of the Assyrians shall the enemy besiege them, okay? Who are them? The Caramanians again, and consume some of them. And in their host shall be fear and dread and strife amongst their kings, right? Because the Caramanians are the Iranians, Iraq, Afghanistan, Kyrgyzstan, all of these other different individuals, Libya, Ethiopia, Canaan, okay, actually the Hamites, because most of these people are all Muslim, right? Okay. Now let's go back over here to where was I at? Joel. I went too far. There it is. Joel chapter 3, verse 6. Right? The children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have you sold unto the Grecians, that you might remove them far from their border. Right? Now, Salakia, proclaim ye this amongst the Gentiles, Joel chapter 3, verse 9. Prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up, right? So that's exactly what they're doing right now. They're gathering, the Most High, Yahweh Bashim, Yahweh Shai, is gathering all of the armies of the world and the Muslim communities, okay, to defend the people of Gaza, right, against the Assyrians, who are the Israeli, the Amalekite Khazars that call themselves the JEWs and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan, because they worship Satan at the bottom of their synagogues every third Sunday, worshiping and sacrificing little children. They've been doing it for centuries. They just don't tell you about it. How we found out about it is diligent research, going to libraries, going to bookstores and asking the librarian for these books and finding out for ourselves. I found out through Elder Malcolm of a book by William Beeston called The Roman Empire, the Empire of the Edomites. Another book called Nature Knows No Color Line. Another that I'm still reading. Another book called Who is Esau Edom? Okay, you can't even find that book for less than $3,000. Okay, you can't even download it onto your devices now. You see what I'm saying? I was going to go and print out a copy of Who is Esau Edom and then make a bunch of copies. Just hand them out to people at random on the street. Let them know, hey, this is the guy that you worship, you want to be like. Okay, are you sure? Okay, and then it has proof that the Babylonian Talmud, that the so-called Israeli that they worship, is the complete opposite, the total polar opposite of everything written in the Bible. Biblical prophecies, scriptures, all of it. Right? Proclaim ye this amongst the Gentiles, Joel chapter 3, verse 9. Prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears, let the weak say, I am strong. Right? And all of the so-called weak nations that America has been picking on now have thermonuclear capabilities. So now they think that they're just as strong as America, which they are, okay, because of the ICBM thermonuclear missiles that they purchased from Russia, okay, Gog and Magog, like it says in Ezekiel chapter 38, okay. They're in the process of Ezekiel 38 and 10. Let's get that one right quick. Ezekiel. Oh, well, do it again. Salakia. Ezekiel. God damn, man. What's up, man? Okay, watch. See that? Ezekiel 38 and 10. Right? Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, it shall come to pass that at the same time shall things come into thy mind, and thou shalt think an evil thought. Right? Who are these individuals? Okay. Oh, okay. I think I should have started up at the top here. Okay, Ezekiel 38:2. Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, Russia, the prince of Meshech, Tubal, right? The prince of all of these so-called Edomites, all these warlike devils, right? And say, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, Russia. I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth and all thine army, horses and horsemen. There's hooks, okay, as the mainstream media and things that they're saying about this Vladimir Putin, right? This premier president, whatever, okay, into thy jaws, into his pride, and I will bring thee forth and all thine army, horses and horsemen, right? All of their military, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords, right? Persia, Ethiopia, Libya, with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Where are they going to go? Okay, like it says in Joel chapter 3, verse 9 through 11, right? Let the weak say, I'm strong. Where are they going? Okay, well, let's go back to Joel. Jose, wow, come on, man. Yep, gotta wait. Joel chapter 3, verse 2, right? I will also gather all nations and bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. Okay, see the African slave trade, the sub-Saharan slave trade with Ishmael, the African slave trade with Ham, the transatlantic slave trade with the Grecians, the so-called Europeans, okay? And the people that they were shipping around from continent to continent for all of these thousands of years were Israelites, because the Most High God said that he would scatter us to all nations because we would not keep his law, statutes, and commandments. See what I mean? Let's get back to the video.
The Europeans, with their firearms, offered these competing rulers a potential advantage over their enemies. In turn, the huge amounts of captives that these kingdoms acquired in their wars were useful currency to trade with the Europeans. Additionally, the other goods like cloth and ceramics that the Europeans brought were status symbols that the new African elite could use to showcase their wealth and power. Different peoples responded in different ways to the opportunities of European slave trading. The Kingdom of Congo made contact with Portuguese explorers in 1483 and traded thousands of slaves every year. The slaving relationship between the two powers was sophisticated and mutually beneficial. For example, Congolese King Alfonso I saw the Portuguese as a useful outlet for the excess slaves he acquired during his expansionary wars, and he was an eager participant in slave trading. However, he also asserted his own power over it in 1526 by forcing Portugal to submit to his legal framework for slavery, which governed how exactly someone might be enslaved, and provided protections for those who were not legitimately enslaved, mostly his own subjects taken by criminal raiders or opportunists. A similar enthusiasm was seen among the various Akan peoples of modern Nigeria. They occupied an area known as the Gold Coast and were similarly prolific as both sellers and purchasers of slave labor. The gold mines that made the Akan so wealthy in the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries were filled by slaves they purchased from both African and European merchants. As many as a third of the population of the various Akan states were enslaved people. In almost every case, these slaves were from non-Akan ethnic groups. Any sense of African solidarity in the face of European slave trading was almost non-existent. The ethnic divides that split Africa were far older than European contact, and would not be quickly changed by the arrival of foreigners on their shores. There was, of course, resistance. Many European slave ships were attacked by coastal raiders, but these reactions were rare and relatively ineffective. Most of the time, these were small-scale attacks by small tribes, or villages near where the Europeans dropped anchor. It was these tiny, disconnected groups who were most vulnerable to slavery, and their shows of defiance rarely saved them in the end. One state that did turn against European slaving was the Kingdom of Benin. The Kingdom of Benin was not the Benin we know today, but a small territory in modern-day Nigeria. Initially a partner in slave trading, by the mid-16th century, the kingdom was facing a serious drain on population, especially among its men. Two rulers, Oba Esigie and Oba Orhobuga, are credited with ending Benin's participation in Atlantic slave trading and closed Benin's ports to European traders. Slavery was not abolished in the country. In fact, the Kingdom of Benin would fight to uphold domestic slavery against Britain in the late 19th century. But this kingdom shows that Africans responded in many different ways to slavery. Each kingdom and ethnic group assessed their own situations and reacted accordingly, whether that was to sell slaves or prohibit it as they saw fit.
Okay. Hold on. Right. Ezekiel chapter 6 verse 8. Yet will I leave a remnant that ye may have some that shall escape the sword among the nations when ye shall be scattered through the countries. So you see, the Most High God, because we had done wrong to him by not keeping his law, as we had promised under Mount Sinai by Moses the prophet, where the Most High gave him his law, we promised that we would keep his commandments, and we haven't done it so to this day. Ezekiel chapter 28 verse 25. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, when I shall have gathered the house of Israel from the people among whom they are scattered, and shall be sanctified in them in the sight of the heathen, then shall they dwell in their land that I have given to my servant Jacob. And the Most High God gave, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, gave the land of Israel that is currently being trodden down by the heathen, by the Gentiles right now, to Jacob, the 12 tribes, right? Ezekiel 36 and 19, and I scattered them among the heathen, and they were dispersed through the countries. According to their way and according to their doings, I judge them. Right? Right? 2nd Ezra 2, verse 7. Let them be scattered abroad among the heathen. Let their names be put out of the earth, for they have despised my covenant. Right? This is where we would discontinue from our heritage as God's people. Discontinued. Boom. Oh. Okay. So like you. Yeah. Well, anyway, I think my point has been made. Okay. All I was trying to do was, I seen this video and I thought that I could get something going on with it, but that's fine. Definitely going to make a part 2 to this video. All praises to the Most High, Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakodash. Double honor to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone for pushing 100% truth through rule well. And peace and salutations to the hopeful elect. Shalom.